Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome teachers, students, and many EF staffers from around the world. We are so glad you've decided to join us for this exciting event on the EF virtual stage in celebration of UN Day, which is upcoming on Monday, October 24th. My name is Darby, and I oversee educational partnerships for EF Explore America, and I am joined by my awesome colleague at EF, Courtney Betts, who I work with very closely and helps to ensure the very best customer experience for our traveling teachers and students on every single educational tour. Courtney will be co-moderating this event with me today as we engage in an exciting dialogue with our very special and esteemed guest, the 2022 UNA USA Youth Observer to the United Nations, Himaja Nagireddy. So welcome, Himaja. So happy and honored to have you speaking with us today. Before turning this over to you, I want to let our audience know a little bit more about your background. In addition to being this year's UNA USA Youth Observer to the United Nations, Himaja is currently a Health Equity Research Fellow at the Johns Hopkins School of Medicine and the CDC. She recently graduated with a master's degree in science in environmental epidemiology with a concentration in infectious disease epidemiology from Harvard, where she was selected as a 2021 Presidential Public Service Fellow. She served as the co-chair of UNA Women for 4 years, where she led and supported programming and UN advocacy efforts for over 20,000 members across the country. So in a word, wow. Our time together will be mainly devoted to hearing Himaja's fascinating story and her vital work impacting our communities and our world. We'll save time for a Q&A at the end that Courtney will help to facilitate. We have already received many questions from you, but please ask questions in the chat throughout, and we will try to get to as many of those as we can, time permitting, of course. And so with that said, Himaja, we will turn this over to you. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you so much, Darby. And I have to say huge props to Darby and Courtney for helping behind the scenes. We've had so many technical issues. And so just their support and your support has been really helpful and I'm just incredibly grateful to be here with you all today. So in a nutshell, my name is Himaja. As Darby said, I am the UNA USA Youth Observer to the UN. This is our 11th year of the program, which is really exciting. And whenever I start an introduction of myself, I always start with an introduction of my parents because I believe that my story really starts with them, and so much of my lived experience is because of them. So my mom and dad were born in South India and immigrated here to the US when they were in their 20s, and they did so really in prospects for better educational opportunities, better jobs, things like that. And that's kind of how me and my sister and my brother came to be born in the US, and that's where we lived and grown and all that good stuff. I started off not really thinking of myself as an activist, not ever thinking I would become an activist. I was an extremely shy kid, actually, growing up, and I always thought that being an advocate meant that you had to be extroverted, that you had to be able to carry a crowd, that you had to be able to be, to be able to put all of yourself out there without fear, without hesitation. And so in my mind, I was like, there's no way I could ever be an activist. And it really took my teachers, actually, in elementary school, middle school, high school, believing in me and believing that, every single one of their students has the potential to grow and succeed into their best self and provide really good benefit to the world through advocacy. That's kind of what helped me become the person that I am today. So it was really thanks to my teachers and mentors who helped along the way. But yeah, I, and when entered into my elementary school, pretty much being one of the only women of color, or only girl of color in the room, and growing up, that very much shaped my experience. And so another thing that I also try to advocate for is the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion in our educational system, and making sure that we're trying to be as socially just as possible with everything that we do, the curriculum that we teach, the materials that we interact with in a school and academic setting. All of those carry a really big impact. So that's my little introduction and kind of where I am. And the other thing I wanted to touch upon was, what am I doing as the youth observer? So I'm entering month 2, which is very exciting and very scary at the same time. There's a lot still to figure out, but it's really cool because the program is super flexible, and it really is what the youth observer wants to make of it. That's what shapes their term. So for me, my biggest focuses have been climate justice and environmental justice. Another big important thing that I want to focus on is gender equity, making sure that we're promoting that. And the third thing is civic engagement. And throughout all of them, just making sure that we're doing our best with that. So that's kind of in a nutshell what I've been working on as the youth observer. As part of the youth observer duties, we take our priority interests and we apply them to the conferences that we go to, the people that we meet. So it very much shapes what you do with it. So for example, me being passionate about climate justice and food insecurity, that's why I'm here in Rome, is to attend the World Food Forum and to make sure that the US has strong youth representation with these issues, because a lot of people think about food insecurity and how it relates to climate change as another country's issue and not something that we need to concern about ourselves with in the US, but it very much has an impact. And the people who feel the impact most are those who are disproportionately burdened. And so really making sure that we're thinking about food insecurity in terms of food access and food prices and, you know, all the things that go into people being able to live in a healthy way is really important. And so that's something we've been focusing on through some of our efforts. But that's a little bit about the Youth Observer program, what I'm planning on doing with it, and happy to answer any specific questions, because I know that Darby and Courtney had a few, and we'd also love to hear from you too if you have any specific questions.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing a little bit about who you are and what you're doing in your current role with the UN. I think it's really interesting to hear from you, because I don't think it's a role that many people are necessarily aware of. And so it's cool to be able to see how you've gotten to where you are today. One thing that we do, I know you've shared a little bit about yourself, and Darby went through your accolades and what you've been doing before this role. But when here at EF, we love to learn a little bit about the human and who you are at your core. So if you could share a fun fact about yourself, something that, you know, maybe not everybody knows, so we can get a little bit more to know you.
Thank you. So my fun fact that I like sharing is that I'm really into mystery and suspense. I love like mystery novels. Sherlock Holmes is like my favorite novel, so I always like, that's like my go-to novel whenever I'm stressed. I don't read much, but I'll read that. One thing though that I've definitely taken from that is the importance of and also the cool applications of applying an investigative, curious mindset to the work that I do as a youth observer. For example, one of the things that we do as part of the Youth Observer program is we host listening tours. So, so far we've met with over 200 students, which is absolutely incredible. And that's just within the first couple of weeks. So we're really excited to get many young voices heard and prioritized in the reports that we create based on this feedback to send to our US and UN leadership. The one thing that we always do within these listening tours is we try to ask the right questions in terms of how do we really get to who are our young people? You know, every single one of you carries a story, and that story shapes how you advocate. It shapes who you are, and it shapes the change that you can make with your voice. And so one thing that we've been trying to do is asking people about their story, but doing so in a way that creates a safe space. So it's a really cool way of kind of, you know, applying, you know, a curious mindset to the work of the UN through connecting people and their stories, and really getting to the heart of, at the end of the day, we're all humans, which is exactly what you said, Courtney.
I think it's cool that you were able to find a way to bring your passion into this new career for yourself, right? I don't think that you necessarily think about reading, mystery novels and spy novels as a youth would then help you be able to ask questions and be inquisitive in your career. So I think that's a really interesting tie to kind of bring English into your world. English as in, there are English classes of reading. One thing that you did mention when you were talking about that was your listening tours. And I think that's a really cool aspect of your role, so that you're really taking that information to the UN. For any of the students or people on this webinar today who might not know too much about the UN, can you talk a little bit about its importance in the global community?
Absolutely. Can you still hear me okay? Amazing. Okay, we have lost one earbud on the floor, but I will get that as soon as I answer this question. So I love this question because it really gets to the heart of why we advocate for the UN. The UN Day is really a chance for us to celebrate the global progress that the UN has had a fundamental impact in shaping, but at the same time, it's an opportunity for all of us to say, listen, we have 17 goals that we want to get done by 2030. How far are we in achieving that? What can the UN do better? What can we do better to support the UN in order to make these goals more achievable? And so that's something that we've been definitely talking about in UNA USA, and UN Day is a really cool way of kind of celebrating that and really embracing that as a challenge that we need to undertake, but that we're undertaking together in partnership, in collaboration. So this UN Day's theme is Nourishing Peace, and it's focused on how food insecurity is a really interdisciplinary issue. When we talk about food insecurity, we're talking
It looks like we may have lost connection for a hot second.
Oh,
Himaja, you're just frozen. We can hear you again. So there you go. Looks like you're back. Thank you.
Okay, we're back.
We're back.
We love that. I think my Wi-Fi cut out for a second, but so what I was saying was UN Day is about nourishing peace, and this UN Day's theme is really significant because food insecurity is affected by a lot of issues. It's a very interdisciplinary issue, but it also causes and exacerbates issues that we see in, social injustices, in gender inequities, in economic equity, in making sure that people have an equal access to foods that they can afford, that are healthy for them, that are healthy for their kids, that are healthy for their loved ones. So I think that it's a really important issue. And I'm really glad this is the UN Day's theme this year, because I think that similar to other UN Day themes in the past, we can't look at these issues in silo. And I think that's exactly what the SDGs gives a nod to too, that we really need to be thinking about how these SDGs interact with each other, and how we can really understand the systemic issue in order to create systemic solutions. And I think this was what the UN Day celebrates.
No, I think that that's awesome. I think, the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, those are things that we know that our educators and our groups are thinking about, and it's really nice to have that common language. Picking off from what you were just chatting about in terms of the theme and some of that work, we did have a question in the chat that kind of ties into that. So I'd love to just stay on this topic for a second. So the question was, how do you think about prioritizing the many different facets or causes of food insecurity, climate justice, and gender equality? What overlaps do you see, and how do you begin to work on those?
That's a really good question. I always think, for me, I think my default is thinking about things from a social justice perspective. And so that's kind of where I prioritize where all of those three intersect. climate injustice primarily affects people of color, for example. We see that here in the US with environmental justice communities, which are communities that are disproportionately burdened by environmental contaminants and environmental phenomena like high air pollution, rising sea levels, etc. People of color, for example, are also more prone to be food insecure. We can look at that from an economic aspect, right? So many people of color aren't given the same access to federal benefits, such as SNAP, compared to their white counterpart. That's another aspect that diminishes their ability to eat the food that they need to be eating in order to protect themselves and their health. The third thing about gender, we've seen particularly women of color are disproportionately burdened. Many people know that, women oftentimes go through many different cycles of their life. And it's really important that nutrition is first and foremost, but oftentimes that can't be the case for many people. So women of color particularly have less access to those federal benefits, have less access to healthy food, have higher nutrition needs that are often not met. And that's another fault with the healthcare system. Primary care gaps are huge when it comes to women of color. All of this said, we see that this then becomes a very intersectional issue. And so I love this question in terms of how do we prioritize all these different facets? And I think it really does depend on what you bring to the table. What are you passionate about? What are your lived experiences? And how does that shape how you see these intersectional issues? And making sure those are said, because a lot of people don't know that so many of these issues do connect. And I think part of it is really educating people in a peer-to-peer manner, saying, listen, there are so many ways that these issues are aligned, and that by addressing one issue, we need to be thinking about how this affects other issues as well.
I think you're so right that there is this intersectionality, that it's hard to just say this is step one. There's so many things that kind of come into those topics. But you kind of mentioned earlier about, your experiences have kind of led you to where you are today. And a lot of that had to do with what you talked about in school and your education. So, thinking back to that middle school timeframe that you kind of alluded to earlier when you were doing your introduction, was there a teacher that influenced you and your educational track, or someone that inspired you along the way that you want to share with us?
Yes, absolutely. And first of all, I have to say, when Darby and Courtney first shared this question with me, I was so excited because I was thinking about which teacher to share about. And it really did come down to my fifth grade teacher, Mr. Grove, because I remember that was a moment in my life where I had a very low self-esteem. I was struggling a lot with social anxiety. And Mr. Grove really helped me feel like there was a place for my voice in the classroom, which was really valuable to me. He would take the time to, ask me what I thought, but not do so in a way that put me on the spot, but was more so of you can contribute to this discussion too. I know that you have really great ideas. And he was also the type of person who, really got to know his students and foster that one-on-one connection. And it really felt like I could trust him as a friend when I needed something. Oh, there we go, which was really valuable. So I would say it was definitely Mr. Grove. Mr. Grove for the win.
That's amazing. I think that each of us probably have that same type of teacher, especially, we have those kind of conversations within the EF world because so many of us are, working in educational travel because of educators that did something to us positively in the past. So it's awesome that your path has led you to being able to represent students across the world at the UN. So I think that's really a nice thing. And I hope that that teacher will hear that one day and be proud of his role in that for you. Thinking about the student experience, on this call, we might have some students who are thinking about getting involved in advocacy. And, what do you think, that seems like a daunting task. What do you think could be a way, or some advice maybe, that you would share on how they could get started?
Absolutely. I'll recycle the answer that I used last time, but I'll add a little bit of flavor to it, because why not? What I would say is the most important thing is definitely find yourself, and find your self-love, embrace yourself, lean into your story. I think the biggest game changer for me as an activist was when I started being more vocal about my story and where I come from, because honestly, for the longest time, like, I didn't even know how to conceptualize who I was. I was like, I'm this person, but what is my story? Like, what is my background? How does that feed into who I am? And once I kind of got that sorted out for myself, I think it really strengthened my advocacy. I think it was something that helped me find strength, so that when people, disagreed, or there have been so many cases too when people have negated my life experiences, have tried talking over it or ignoring it or discarding it completely. And knowing that they can't take away something that I lived with and something I've experienced, and I know what I'm speaking about because I've lived through it, that gave me a lot of power. And also finding my community of people who have also been through similar experiences, or maybe people who haven't been through similar experiences but who can empathize, was really helpful too. So when starting your journey of advocacy, know it's going to be hard, but know that there is a worldwide network of supporters, and you can consider me one of your supporters. So it's definitely something where we have each other's back, and the work that we do is so important, because advocacy is about calling out the hard truths, and sometimes people don't want to hear the hard truths, and sometimes it requires that constant pushing to make sure those concerns are heard. So we got your back on that.
I think, that's always been, I think, something that when I've talked to students out on the road and getting excited about, like, why are they on tour? What are they here in DC to learn about? I think it's those little moments that could help spark something inside them to get involved with, either in their own community or on the world stage, like you have been. I think that's a really cool to be able to start small. One question that I was thinking about that, in terms of, you are in Rome right now, going to this conference on food insecurity and food as a topic. What are you hoping to get out of that experience specifically to be able to then continue over the next few months in your role?
That is actually a really great question. And, it's interesting because this also just speaks to the flexibility of kind of the journey of a youth observer, where, and I wasn't anticipating this. I thought it was a very rigid job. When I came in, I was like, where's the room for creativity? And they're like, it's all creative. And I was like, whoa, mind switch. But it's exactly that. One thing that we had been hearing constantly in like every single one of the listening sessions I had held, I was constantly hearing young people saying they were passionate about addressing food insecurity. And even though that wasn't originally listed on like my top priorities for Youth Observer, and the advocacy that I wanted to push forth just in this year, it was something that I came about to because it was something young people really wanted to prioritize. And my job is to really make sure that young people are being represented and that their concerns are being addressed. And so I'm hoping that this World Food Forum and participating in this is just one of many things that we do this year. One thing that we're trying to do is we're trying to hold a virtual climate storytelling rally. So it's going to be a virtual rally. We're going to get as many young people as possible and spotlight people working. For example, on food insecurity, we're going to make that a spotlight because we know that that's been an issue a lot of young people care about. And we're aiming to have UN officials and US officials as the audience members. And so it's going to be young people speaking. It's going to be young people being the expert. And what are they going to be talking about? They're going to be sharing their stories. They're going to be sharing the climate stories that got them to where they are. They're going to share the stories that brought them to their advocacy and gave them the drive to keep going. because it's our stories that people leave with. People never remember the facts that you give them, but it's going to be the stories that resonate with people. And that's what they're thinking about when they're making those decisions and when they're voting on resolutions. And so we're hoping that through sharing these stories in a really collaborative, positive environment, that we're able to get some change out of that.
That's amazing. I love that idea. I've always been a huge advocate for storytelling, because when you share your story, that builds empathy, and that makes all of us better global citizens. So I think that that's a really great approach to the year. Quickly before we have to end this, you're traveling right now, and obviously for your role, you're traveling a lot and you're speaking to people who love to travel. What is your go-to travel item? What must you have for any trip you're going on?
I would say my go-to travel item is my adapter, which sounds so stupid, but I love my adapter. I got it on sale actually, and it allows me to use my laptop as a battery when I need to charge my phone, and it allows me to connect my phone to my laptop if I need a hotspot. So it's been a very versatile instrument that I'm like, you know what? I thought I could live without this, and now I'm realizing I could not live without this. And then the other thing I'll say, because I'm gonna cheat and allow myself to have two, is I love my headphones. I love listening to music. That's what keeps me cooled down. But then I also listen to really upbeat music when I'm trying to run, but I hate running, but I have to run somewhere because I'm running out of time. I'll jam to that playlist. So it has helped me out in quite a few jams.
This is awesome. Himaja, thank you so much, Court. Thank you so much for moderating. Himaja, thank you for the inspiration, for sharing your story with all of us. This certainly gives me a lot to think about, and I know teachers and students in schools and in homes across the country all feel the same way. It's also really important to EF and in support of the United Nations that we get your feedback. So for everyone in schools and at home, please take a few minutes and complete the survey that will pop up in just a minute or two. Himaja really wants to bring back answers to the UN with questions like, what rights do young people care about? What human rights are important to you? And a few others. So please take just that 2 minutes to provide your thoughts. And thank you to everyone for joining us today. Happy UN Day to all. It was just such a pleasure to see you. Cord, thanks again. And everyone enjoy your day.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.